general stuff. I have other workshops. I do one-on-one consultations. So if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me and we will figure something out. Okay. The first thing about proposal development is defining what you want, right? So the first part of that is, what is it you want to do? Because that's what you should be asking for money for. If you really don't want to do something, don't offer to do it, because if you get it granted, then you will be expected to do it. The second part of that is figuring out what you're looking to fund, right? So in a proposal situation, you say there is a need for something. I am offering to do something, and I would like your money to pay for these things so I can get that thing done, right? So there are a couple of pieces to that. There is what you want to do. There's what they want to have happen, and you're asking for their money to let you do these things. So what you can fund, examples of that are your time. So most faculty have a 9-month appointment, so you can have some of your summer paid for. If you have so much money, your summer is already paid for. Sometimes you can buy out courses. Discuss this with your department head. This is not something I can help with. Is there a new position, like you need a manager for your research group? Is there a research scientist that you want to fund to do something like that? That's something that you can ask for money for. You can pay for graduate student or undergraduate student time. You can buy materials, you can buy equipment. Those are some examples, all right? Like there are other things. And what you really want to think about in this situation is, what is it you need to do? And then how much does that cost? Because generally they'll give you money for it, right? If it's within the bounds of what they're willing to offer, they're willing to pay for this stuff. All right, so looking for funding opportunities. This is understanding who has money that they're offering for you to compete for. Federal opportunities all are required to be posted on grants.gov. This is a free website. You go in there, you don't have to sign in or anything, and you type in your keywords, or there's some filter options on the left. I think I have a picture in a second. It is a single access point for 900 grant programs from 26 federal agencies. I do want to make a distinguish. I want to distinguish between grants and contract opportunities. So grants are what agency offers. They say, we would like this thing to get done, and we're offering this amount of money, and you will do the best you can to get that thing done, right? So you're going to propose these tasks, you're going to propose these milestones, but if you are lucky enough to receive that money, you're not tied to actually doing those things. There is an expectation that like what you're offering to do is hard, and you don't actually know what's going to happen. And so some things might not go the way that you expect. And so that's totally fine, right? Because that's research. Contract opportunities on the second one are different. Contract means they expect something to get done. They are paying for a thing to get done. So the government posts contract opportunities on beta.sam.gov. And that means they are paying for you to create a robot. They are paying for janitorial services. They are paying for a thing that they expect to get done. Some things for researchers are relevant on beta.sam.gov. So like you could potentially do both, but there is a difference between those two, and that is the expectation of what needs to get done at the end. We can talk about that more, just wanted to make that distinguishment here. All right, so beyond federal opportunities, we pay for a license for all people with an OU email address to GrantForward. GrantForward.com is, like I said, fee-based database, but anybody with an OU email address can sign in and create an account and start searching. In a similar way, it is a database. You type in some keywords, you use the filter options, and you go from, I forget what the number was, but like 26,000 opportunities with no filters to hopefully a reasonable searchable amount for me is like 20, right? So you want to use those filters to get down to about 20 and then go through those and maybe find a couple that are relevant. And then maybe, you know, a week or two from now, you go and do the search again and see if there's different words that you should try to get more opportunities that are aligned with what you're interested in. All right, Foundation Center is another one, fee-based, pretty expensive. We only have a few licenses for this, so you can't just sign in and create your own account. You have to go through OU Advancement, which is sort of our foundation side. I don't really know what to call it. It's the foundation side of the university. So they hold the licenses. You send them an email, say, this is what I'm interested in doing. could you do a search with these keywords? I would really be interested to see what sort of information you have. That actual database has a lot of information on the actual funding agency. So you can find out super duper specific terms about, like, you know, how they're structured, who they funded, more information that you would find at Grant Forward. But Grant Forward should have the funding opportunities. It's my understanding they're good for grad students to look for fellowships. They're good for nonprofits, more so than the previous database that we were using. Check it out. All right, this is what Grant Forward looks like when you actually, I've signed, maybe this is the homepage because it indicates that I haven't logged in yet. You would type the keywords here, and here are the filter options. So you'd click this and you'd actually, like, usually there's a toggle bar. You can say, I want, so for example, the amount of money you're looking for. Most of these places will have caps. I'm offering up to this amount of money. So if you're interested in $10,000 for, you know, 2 summers worth of your work, then you can come over here and make the balance between 5,000 and 20,000 and see what falls in between, right? I now want to talk a little bit about knowing your space, right? So you all are experts in your field. But now that you're in this position of looking for funding, you need to know the players, right? So through Grant Forward, I hope you're going to be able to find several organizations who fund efforts in your work, right? So they could be federal agencies, they could be state agencies, they could be nonprofits, there could be all sorts. There could be 3 federal agencies and 2 state, right? Like, there are different options here. So definitely explore what you might be able to find there. Then you also want to know who's submitting proposals to the thing you want to apply to. What do successful proposals there look like? So for example, NSF is always looking for reviewers, right? So get on the review panels, reach out to the program manager that you think is relevant and say, hey, you know, I'm doing work in your area. I'm, you know, at this point of my career. And if you are looking for a reviewer, I'd be happy to serve, right? And then you also want to follow what others are doing in the area, right? So when you start talking to your program managers, they're going to say, well, so-and-so is doing this and so-and-so is doing that, right? And you want to actually not be surprised by that, if at all possible, because you've been attending conferences and meetings. You are keeping current with the new publications in your field that are relevant to what you do, right? So you want to make sure that you understand what's happening and how you fit into the community, but also how you're different from everyone else, right? That's the good position for you to be in. All right, now you have a funding opportunity that you want to aim for, right? You've done a little searching. You said, these are 3 I'm interested. This is the one I'm going to focus on for the next 6 months or whatever, right? Whatever your strategy is. The first thing I do when I look at a funding opportunity is I check eligibility. If it says higher education, if it says nonprofit, generally you're clear to go. Sometimes individual works, but if you have questions, we can help you with that. Single or multiple PIs. There are some that say single PI only. So you can't have a team. That doesn't mean you can't work with anyone, right? You can't talk to anyone. It just means that only one person is able to receive the money and spend it. Some of them require multiple PIs. You just want to be clear on that before you start planning what you're going to propose. And sometimes there's special qualifiers. So sometimes they'll say, this is for an MSI, a minority serving institution. Or I've seen with some community engagement projects, they'll say, this has to come from like the community foundation for the city. You can work with them. You can have your work paid for, but the submitting organization needs to be that city foundation. Does that make sense? Okay. The other thing I look at is the minimum maximum budget, right? If you tell me you're looking for $10,000 and this says it's a minimum of 100 and a maximum of 200,000, 100,000 to 200,000, then I'm going to say, find some partners, hire more grad students, right? I'm going to ask you to think about how you can scope what you're offering to do a little differently so that you meet what they're asking for. On the other hand, if you're looking for 10,000 and they're asking for 500, I'm going to ask you, is this a good use of your time? That's your decision. I can't tell you. Okay. And then I look at the submission deadline. If it's due in 2 days, I will ask you again, is this a good use of your time? It would give me gray hairs, but that's me. So the other thing to be aware of for submission deadlines is sometimes they are recurring. So NSF, for example, has programs that'll have a deadline that's a set deadline. So maybe it's due in a month, but it's a recurring program. So it comes out every year. So you might not be ready for this next one in a month, but you might be ready for a year and a month from now. So you want to get that sort of planning in your head ready. All right. The other thing I do is see what they're asking for in the actual proposal. Some of them get pretty specific. I want a section on this, I want a section on that. So you want to start creating your template of the document you're going to fill out. And I'm going to have a section that starts with this. I'm going to have a section that starts with that. The saddest thing is having a proposal returned without review. And if you have a section that like is buried because they couldn't find it and they return it without review, I will be very sad for you.
Laura, we have a question. So
Yeah.
how early before the deadline should we plan to submit?
I feel like this is a Bonnie question, but I would definitely say more than a couple days. Bonnie?
We like to say probably about 2 days ahead of time. That gives us a little bit of room to work with it. If there is an issue, then we can always, pull it or do a change corrected application if we need to.
So what Bonnie is glossing over is that sometimes we submit things that we think are totally perfect. And it goes through and we're like, phew. And then 10 minutes later, it's like, nope, there was something wrong. And if that is now after the deadline, it didn't get in time. So
Just if you want a rule of thumb, I would say a week would be wonderful.
to plan for sure.
Yeah. And then,
And then life will make it a couple days.
exactly.
having participated in these fun things before. I got to tell you, the PDSs, which we'll get into, have nerves of steel. All right. There is also some other guidance that you should be aware of. Generally, this stuff gets covered and our PDSs and people in research financial services help ensure all of this stuff is covered, I guess is a good word. But there are federal requirements. The agency is going to require things. The state requires that we do some things. And then we have local policies like university policies, right? So some of these are like cost share, which is a thing that Bonnie will talk about briefly, but there are rules to how some of these things happen. If you work with us, we will try our best to make sure that you follow all of these requirements. I'm going to let Bonnie get into that later. All right, this is, let's see. So this is a point of understanding who's been funded, right? Who's been successful in getting the kind of money that you're looking for. So this is just one example of NSF. NSF publishes an abstract, a couple of paragraphs on everything they've awarded, right? If you actually get an award, they require you to write an abstract, which will be public, goes on here. You can go in here, this is an image, but like if you go to the nsf.gov webpage, you go to awards here, and then you can do an advanced search for whatever's relevant to you. So you can filter for the program that you're in. You can, I was going to say the year. I think you can do the year. You can do it by Oklahoma. Do you want to see if anyone at Oklahoma State or OU has won an award in this program already? Because you can then do a filter for that. You can also do a filter for the award amount, right? So if you have a price range that you want to look at, those are different options. You can also click, all of these blue things are links. So if you click here, you can actually see the abstract that they wrote, and they have a quick glance at the information. So this award amount was $500,000. It started in 2020, and this was at Oklahoma State. This was at Georgia Tech. The award amount was 540. I did a search. This looks like a search for career awards because there's a lot of career in here. So go and look and see what they funded already, right? A lot of organizations do this. Nonprofits do it all the time. They want to brag about who they are funding. And so they'll say, this is the project we're funding. And they'll be very clear, about why they're interested in doing it. And they will say who got the money. So go and look. If you want their money, go and see what they already thought was a good investment. Okay. And then we definitely suggest you develop a one-page summary. So one-page summary answers 4 questions. They are, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Why is it important? What have others done to try to solve the problem, right? So this is your equivalent of a literature review. What is the gap? What remains to be solved? This is generally 1 or 2 sentences, teeny tiny. You just get in and get out. This is what is still a problem. And then number 4 is what will you do to solve the problem? If an accepted format exists, use one. So this is equivalent to the, I guess it's just the project summary, right? For NSF. Their accepted format is overview, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. But you still have to answer those questions, right? It's just a little bit different in the organization of those. For DoD, sometimes they want a white paper, which is like 2 pages, 3 pages. Sometimes they want a quad chart. You still have to answer these questions, right? Sometimes it's just bullets rather than full sentences. Have your colleagues, have me review it and give you some comments, right? Hopefully that'll help you focus it down. And then I don't think I talk about it there. Okay. So, and then what we are hearing from program managers is that they want to be able to provide you feedback before you put the effort in creating a full proposal. So send them this 1-page summary, right? Usually send it in an attachment, send them a really short email that says, hey, I'm really interested in this program. And I have a couple questions about it. I'm planning to do this. Does it align with what you want to give out money for? I mean, say it nicer than that, but more or less. And attach a 1-page summary that they can look at if they want to get into the details, right? If they aren't willing to give you feedback, usually they'll say, right? So for example, the Department of Energy, if they have an open RFP, they can't talk, right? All they can do is regurgitate what's exactly in that RFP. But NSF is saying, we'll tell you, right? It is in our best interest if you're offering to do things that we want to get done. So we will give you some idea of, does this align, does it not? Maybe you should check over there at this other program. And it's an entry point for you to start to develop a relationship with your program manager, which is a good thing. Okay. In this, you want to demonstrate what makes you unique, right? Why are you the right person? What expertise do you have? What have you done already? Are you doing this? And it's part of one of the research, the VPRP's strategic initiatives. So it's part of a bigger plan. And therefore, yes, you're offering to do this, but there is this whole momentum behind you that is going to also help propel you forward, right? That just supports your story. And then highlight strengths that others may not have. So maybe you have a fabulous program that analyzes text that nobody has, or maybe you have access to a fabulous microscope on campus that no one else has, right? So those are the sorts of things you want to be able to highlight. All right. You want to make sure that you're cultivating a new idea. So a little bit like what it says for answering question 2 of like, what have others done? You want to acknowledge what they've accomplished and say they did great work. I'm not going to say that they're awful people who should not have been given any money before, but they didn't solve the problem. We still have one, right? And so I'm going to offer to do something different that's going to help us get to that solution, knowing that they did that stuff and it was valuable. You want to bring in your knowledge from other areas as relevant, and then define the rate, scope, and research questions. So this comes back a little bit to the money. It comes back a little bit to what you're offering to do. Do not promise more than you can do for the requested funds. So if you say, give me $10,000 and I will cure cancer, the reviewers on the other side are going to say, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going to give $10,000 to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, because there is no way they're going to cure all cancer with $10,000, right? So you want to be able to say, hey, I'm going to do these things, be pretty specific, and say, I think this is therefore going to let us know this, and that will help us solve the problem that way. And you want to make sure it comes across very clearly that you're going to help them achieve their goals, right? So when you read the RFP to understand their goals, use their words. It is not plagiarizing. So if they say they want people to cure cancer by acupuncture, then you're going to say in your proposal, I propose to check out these parts of acupuncture to cure cancer. You want to be very clear, especially in the beginning. And then imagine how your successful work would turn into a newspaper article demonstrating their smart investment, right? Like it's a win-win for both of you if you guys get funded to do something. And so you want to be able to portray it in a way that is, here's how it's a win for you, funding agency. All right, find your program officer. I already talked a little bit about this. If you can get a conversation with them, get one. Email them, ask them for 15 minutes. What usually happens if they agree is that you're on the phone for an hour and a half. So plan for that. But don't ask for an hour and a half, ask for 15 minutes. And then start a conversation and ask different things, right? Here are some things that you could ask. What is a normal budget request, right? Is everything that they fund between $300,000 and $500,000? Because if so, you're not going to ask for $1 million, right? You can ask about what sort of proposed activities that they like to fund. Is it an experimental shop? They want to have surveys? Is it all modeling, right? Like there are different aspects that fall in and out of favor. So have a conversation about what they're interested in right now. Ask if your idea fits in their portfolio. So I was talking to a faculty member who said, I had a conversation with the program manager and we disagree about this part. And I was like, so don't propose that part, propose the other part, right? Because she thought that one part was not going to work. And if you're proposing something that she thinks isn't going to work, it is an uphill battle. You could do it. Perhaps you should try. But maybe if you're first starting out, figure out another part. Or have that conversation, right? Put in the effort to change that person's mind. Okay, and then ask for feedback on your proposed idea. They will tell you, oh, so-and-so is already working on that, or they're doing that part, but this part totally over here is not being explored, right? They're happy to give you that sort of information. And if they aren't, they will tell you. Like I said before, send a short email, describe your project in 1 to 2 sentences, ask 1 or 2 relevant questions, and ask for that 15-minute phone call, right? What I like to do is say, I could be available with these 3-hour blocks. Would that work for you for a 15-minute phone call? And if not, let me know what time would work and I will make time for you, right? You want to be very open to finding the right time for both of you. Prepare for the conversation. I know I probably wouldn't do it, but I encourage all of you to role play with a friend about like how this is actually going to go, because even if you feel silly, if you've used the words before, they will come out easier when you need them. Okay. Remember what they've told you so far. If they've already emailed you a couple times and said, dude, I'm really not into modeling, or I really don't fund everything over $100,000. If you get on the phone with them and say, I want 500, they're going to be like, now you're not paying attention. Okay. Key elements. So the project narrative is going to usually be the biggest chunk of the proposal. You want to plan for the award period. So an award period based on the funding opportunity could be 6 months. It could be 10 years. For example, NSF tends to be 3 years, but there are definitely exceptions to that. And you want to use an appropriate start date. So for an NIH proposal we just sent in, they said the first day this could start is April 1 to 2022. So you don't want to say I'm going to start fall of 2021, right? Again, they're going to think you're not paying attention. You want to have timelines and milestones in mind that come across through your project narrative. You want to be specific with your goals, objectives, tasks, and methods, right? You want it to come across very clearly to them what you're offering to do. And if you have questions on this, then I go over some of this in my writing the one-page summary workshop. These things should be related and build upon each other. They don't have to be the same thing, but if you have 2 objectives within one proposal, the number 2 should have something to do with number 1, right? They should have, in some way be related. Otherwise, why are they in the same proposal? And then as you're talking about all of these things, reviewers should believe that you know what is current and accepted practice in the field, right? So you need to be able to come across and say, I'm choosing to do this survey method, and the reviewer should say, that's the right one, or, but there's this other one, why isn't she using this one, right? And so in your proposal, you should say, I'm not using that one because of these reasons, and they should be valid reasons. And then you get to say, I'm going to use this one for these reasons, and it should be very clear, and no one should be able to question why you're doing it. Okay. Budgetary information. Bonnie's going to go over some of this as well, but again, you need to think about the funds that you need to pay for the work you propose to complete. Don't overpromise, And this is all done within a ORS budget template, which is an Excel file. It's a big file. If you are very nice in working with your PDS the first time, let them know it's your first time and they'll be gentle with you. Once you get into it a couple of times, you'll have a good hang of it, I'm sure. But it's a lot of pages in an Excel file and lots of fields. So ask them to walk you through it. There is also a webinar that Cindy's team does offer if you want the slow walkthrough of the budget template. There's a budget justification oftentimes. This is a written document that goes with your budget and says, I am paying for my time to do these things, and I'm paying for a graduate student to do these things. It doesn't have to be extensive. Sometimes there's a limit, like 2 pages or something like that. But you just want to put a couple of sentences about this line shows $50,000 for a microscope. It is not the microscope that I bought at Walmart. It is this microscope over here, right? Then intellectual and broader merit and broader impacts. In NSF, this is a specific section that you must include with its own heading. But I will argue that any proposal that you submit should include this content, right? Why should people care that you're getting this money? That's what this is. So intellectual merit is, why does my field care that I'm doing this? What is the specific knowledge that I'm creating by doing this work? And broader impacts is, what is my neighbor who is not a faculty member going to benefit from me doing this work? So that should be able to come through probably near a conclusion of, it usually works either at the beginning or at the back, to say, this is why it's really important. Community engagement. Sometimes some of these funding opportunities want you to work with the community. So partnering with local organizations. We have at the Center for Faculty Excellence, Joy Penley, who's the Associate Director for Community Engagement. If you have questions or want to explore different organizations, you can meet with her and she'll give you some thoughts. But generally, if community engagement isn't something that is your active expertise, I would highly encourage you to partner with existing programs, right? If I'm a chemist, I would not create my own outreach program. I would partner with an outreach program to get my chemistry thing through, right? They already have that infrastructure. It's not the best use of your time. As a suggestion I might give you. Okay, ancillary documents. These are things that are generally an afterthought until you realize that they have to go in, and then it's kind of a scramble. So if you can set some of these things up when you're not worried about actually creating the proposal content, that might be in your best interest. So BioSketch and CV, it's more or less the same thing. BioSketch to me means that they have a very specific format, right? So NSF and NIH have BioSketches. They don't ask for CVs. They have page limits versus CVs sometimes are like the whole thing, right? Give us all 10, 15 pages of blah, blah, blah. Okay. So sponsors have guidance for length and content. It always includes education, training, appointment jobs, right? They want to know where you've been, that you've done successful things like that. I've seen them always include a section for publications and products. Usually for BioSketches, there's a certain number, right? So 5 of these, 5 of those. And so we can talk about those different sections if you have questions. NIH has a personal statement section. NSF has a synergistic activity section. They are required. They are not required for both, right? So only NSF requires the synergistic activities. There are software programs. So the federal government decided that there should be a unified way of creating these sorts of documents. And so NIH through NCBI created a formatting system to create these documents. And I know everybody's super excited to learn another software program, but it doesn't have to be that bad once it's set up, right? And so the easiest way to do this is to create an ORCID account that actually goes and finds your publications for you, so you don't have to type them all in. And then you tie your ORCID account to the Science CV account, and then it just pulls all that information in. And then it's a point of you selecting the right publications and the right synergistic activities, okay? I hold a Science CV training. It is not each month. I think I'm doing it twice this semester. I need to change that, sorry. But if you have questions, if you try and get stuck, I'm happy to send you my slides whenever you need them. And I'm definitely the troubleshooting answer. So we will try to get you through this and create you one of these. I definitely suggest if you have a lull period and you're like, I'm bored, do this. I know it's not likely, but just saying. Okay, current and pending. This is the list of current support, including your funded awards and pending proposals, right? So you submitted a proposal or you have current grants that you're working off of. This is something that some funding agencies use to figure out whether or not you have time to do what you propose to do, right? So if you're saying, I'm going to give you 2 summer months and then you've already promised 1 summer month, they're going to be like, you don't have time for this, right? And they also are checking for overlap in projects. So they want to know, okay, you offered to do this vet project for USAID, but that looks really similar to what you're proposing here. So now we need to start differentiating, right? There is a required format for NSF. It's in Science CV as well, but that is actually you have to do some text entry on that one. So hopefully you have a good understanding of which proposals that you've submitted. NIH does not require it at submission, but they can request it if they've decided to fund you. So they also do this double check on the backside to say, do you have time to do these things? Collaborators is a document that NSF requires, and this is an Excel file that you have to enter in the people you've worked with and the people you're affiliated with. And this is to make sure there's not a conflict of interest when they're looking for reviewers. So be honest, right? But also be aware that they ask for suggested reviewers. So when they do that, give them suggestions, right? Because otherwise they go for people that they know, and those people may have no idea what you're working on. So when you're doing this for NSF, it has to be submitted by each PI, co-PI, and senior personnel. So some people are like, well, I don't have to do it. Yes, you do. And that's not one of those things that you want to be scrambling on the day of the deadline. All right, equipment and facilities. Several agencies require this, right? You propose to do all this work. You're going to say you're going to use a microscope. You didn't ask for money for a microscope. Do you have this microscope? Are you going to send your samples somewhere, right? Like, so you need to be able to describe here, what are the pieces of equipment that you're going to be using? You can talk about university facilities, like core facilities, talk about shared facilities within your department or whatever the case may be, right? So this, you definitely want to cover the things that I propose to do. I have the stuff to be able to do it, right? I have an office space. I have a computer. If you need to protect your data, I have a locked file cabinet, right? Those are the sorts of things that you want to talk about. Although I think I jumped the gun on that last one with the file cabinet because that's data management. A lot of places are requiring this too. This is ensuring that you're going to handle your data, access to it, security of it, and quality. So there has been a reaction from the federal agencies that we paid for all this stuff and it's sitting on lab notebooks in somebody's lab and we've never seen it again, right? So they want to make sure that this data is accessible after the fact of the project period. You don't have to make it accessible as soon as you collect it, right? That's not required, but there is an expectation that within, I think it depends by the agency, but sometimes within a year after the project ends, right? So they give you time to publish papers and stuff, but within a year, you need to somehow make that accessible to other people who could use it for their benefit, right? For the benefit of our society. So there is a sort of template thing that will walk through the sections that you should include. And there are examples. And this is the link to it. It's through the OU libraries. It's called the DMP writing tool. And you go through and you say, I'm applying to this, like this agency and this program, and it'll start like providing you the blanks to fill in. Institutional Review Board. I did want to cover this really quickly. If you have human subjects, we have an IRB. And for NIH and NSF, you don't have to have approval for what you're going to do by the time of application, but it is required before you get the money, right? They want to know you're ready to go when they hand you the money, right? So you should have a plan for it at the very least. And there is something similar with animals if you use animals for your research. I wanted to distinguish between letters of collaboration and support and letters of endorsement. So in many different funding agencies, they would like to see you working with other people. And so this could be a community engagement thing. This could be an evaluation, right? Somebody's going to evaluate the work you do and tell you how awesome you are and how great it was. if you say you're going to do it, they like to know that you've actually talked to them and they're aware that you mentioned that these specific people are going to do these things. So for NSF, they have, I think, a two sentence letter that you need to use. You must use. Don't get creative. Don't make it longer. It must be those two sentences. So they want you to append relevant letters to your proposal. If it's a huge proposal, you might have 15, right? If it's a single PI proposal, you might have a couple. But what ends up happening is, I've seen happen in a proposal, is that somebody said, oh, we're going to disseminate this stuff through a coding program that we run through here at OU that reaches out to elementary schools. And the reviews came back and they're like, how do we know they're going to actually do that, right? Like, we don't know that they're going to be able to do it. It was not clear that our co-PI ran that program. So he should have submitted a letter of support as the head of that program to say, I will do this as the head of this program to disseminate this to elementary school kids. Okay. A letter of endorsement generally is not allowed for most federal things that I've seen. So this is where somebody says, this project is the best. It is the best. We will be so beneficial as the city of blank or the state of Oklahoma if so-and-so gets this work. Some places like it, some places don't. So I know for NSF, none of this is allowed. And that's me. Are there any questions? I see stuff in the chat. I only see the number, so.
No, you've answered the ones that we had.
Cool. Bonnie.
Okay. So you're going to drive the slides, right, Clara? Okay. Okay, so I am Bonnie Van Winkle, and I am a proposal development specialist in the Office of Research Services and ORS. Who we are. The Office of Research Services is within the Office of the Vice President for Research and Partnerships. And our primary purpose is to support the externally funded research and sponsored activities within the university community. And we are responsible for pre-award and award administration on the Norman campus and Norman campus related programs on the Tulsa campus. So within ORS, we have Research Information Services, Proposal Development Specialists, and the Sponsored Programs Coordinators. The Research Information Services, they distribute some funding announcements, assist with some compliance items, manage a proposal systems, submission systems, and answer some general questions. The Proposal Development Specialist, which is what I do, we will be your primary contact from the time the information sheet has been submitted until it is submitted to the sponsor. We will assist with guideline interpretation, budget development, and your internal routing. If the sponsor requires the university to submit the proposal, your PDS will do so once you have reviewed and approved the final draft. The Sponsored Programs Coordinator will enter the picture at the funding stage. So they will negotiate the contracts and awards for OU. They will obtain signatures for agreements and contracts. They set up the award accounts. They coordinate with legal, export control, and other compliance areas. And they also assist with modifications and no-cost extensions. So in addition, we also have a data manager and a research programs and training coordinator, which is Cindy. So what is a sponsored project? A sponsored project is external funds for any work such as research, service, instruction, or training that has deliverables. So per OU policy, all sponsored projects must go through the Office of Research Services to be routed for internal approval and submitted to the sponsor. So there are a couple exceptions to this, which are gifts, which go through OU Foundation, or funds that are going to be paid to the PI directly, such as some fellowships.
Bonnie, we had a question earlier. Thanks, Clara. We had a question earlier about what proposals have to go through ORS. And all I wanted to make sure is that you highlight the fact that almost all of the proposals that are submitted to external funding agencies or foundations have to go through ORS. There are a very small number that don't have to. What would you suggest if somebody doesn't know whether this
If they-
particular one has to go through?
If they don't know, they should definitely reach out to us. Rarely do funds go through a department or be paid directly to the PI. Sometimes if you skip the step of ORS and the funds go directly to the PI, you may end up paying taxes on it. You won't get research credit for it. So you want to avoid that at all costs. So if you're ever in doubt, just give us a call and ask.
Thank you.
Next slide. Okay, so the proposal preparation steps, Clara covered the first 4 points of this. And so step 5 is when ORS comes into the picture. So we ask that you submit an information sheet to us about 4 weeks before the sponsor deadline. At that point, you'll develop your budget and budget justification. You'll provide your routing documents to the PDS at least a week before the deadline. So the routing documents will include a statement of work, your budget, and your budget justification. Now, your statement of work does not have to be a final, it can be a draft. We just need to make sure that we get it routed in time, and then you can continue working on your final proposal documents. And then once it's routing, you can continue to finalize your proposal, update your bio sketch, current pending, and any other requirements stated in the guidelines. You will work with your PDS to ensure that all the required submission documents are included and complete. And then we will formally submit the proposal to the sponsor, ideally 2 days before the submission deadline, if not sooner. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this one is a busy slide. Proposal award process overview. There are 2 steps included in the process. The first step is the proposal submission. And this is where you're going to work again with your PDS primarily. First, you'll submit your information sheet, and then your PDS will be assigned to the information sheet, and then they'll reach out to you. And you'll work with them to develop the budget. And we do have the course for the budget development training. But what I have found is if we have a new PI coming in and they look at this budget template and it looks pretty intimidating, I have found that if I just sit down with my PI for 10 or 15 minutes and go through it, that's all it takes. And then it just alleviates a lot of confusion and stress later on down the road. So just reach out to us. I'd be happy to go through it either in person or Zoom anytime. And then the PI will submit documents for the internal routing. And this ensures that all co-PIs, senior personnel, department chairs, or college deans have reviewed and certified the proposal. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with the final proposal that's submitted to the sponsor. This is just for internal approval. And then you will gather and create your required documents for the submission and send them to your PDS. And then we will submit the proposal, either ORS or the PI, depending on what the requirement is. And then the proposal award will be your SPC. It can take anywhere from 2 weeks up to 18 months to hear if you've been awarded. You'll receive a notice of award either from the sponsor or from your sponsor programs coordinator. And your SPC will work with the PI or the PDS on requested budget revisions. Like NSF is notorious for coming back and asking you to reduce your budget. So then we would have to go back in, do a budget revision, resubmit that to NSF. So that's what we would work with the SPC and the PI to do that before the proposal or the grant can be funded.
Bonnie, this actually was a question that came up in new faculty orientation. And I just
Mhm.
wanted to make it clear that this is the conversation between the PI, the faculty member, the SPC in this case, and the sponsor, right? So there are conversations that include all three of those people.
Mhm.
Right? So it's not like the PI and the SPC just decide and then the sponsor gets surprised. There's no surprise here.
Oh, no, no, no. No, the program manager from NSF will actually reach out to the PI and tell them what they want them to do, whether they want them actually to cut out a full year of the project, or they'll tell them how much they want them to cut the budget. And then the PI will generally reach out to us. And then they will negotiate the contract and obtain appropriate signatures. They'll obtain compliance approvals, certifications, and signatures. Then they will go ahead and set up the account, process modifications, supplements, no cost extensions. And then finally, they'll hand off the award to Research Financial Services. And it is important to note that award accounts cannot be set up if step 1 is not done prior to step 2. So always start with that information sheet. And for those of you that are interested in learning more about post-award, the Center for Faculty Excellence will be offering a training session focused on these activities in November. So what is an information sheet? The information sheet is an internal form that is used to provide basic information on the proposal being considered for submission. This is the first step of the ORS process, and we use this information to add the proposal to our internal system and put your proposal deadline on our calendar for planning purposes. And no proposal documents are needed to complete the information sheet. And we just ask if you complete it the best that you can. We can always go back and change it or update it as needed. And again, another training session is focused on submitting an information sheet that is offered through ORS, but you can always reach out to a PDS and we can walk you through it if need be. When do I have to fill out an info sheet? From a requirements perspective, anytime external funds are being requested or sponsored work is being proposed. And from a timing perspective, as soon as you know you're submitting a proposal, you should complete the information sheet. And 4 weeks prior to deadline is a reasonable amount of time for uncomplicated proposals. And more than 4 weeks is requested if the proposal involves subcontracts or cost share or complicated guidelines. And if you decide not to move forward with the proposal, just let us know and we'll go ahead and abandon it. It's not an obligation to move forward at all. The conflict of interest, or a COI. And a conflict of interest refers to a situation in which financial or other personal considerations may compromise an employee's professional judgment in carrying out his or her responsibilities. And there's a link included here for the university's policy regarding conflicts of interest for the Norman campus. So on our information sheet, there is a question regarding the COI. So when you fill it out and by checking the box, the researcher is acknowledging the situation and agrees to work with ORS and other university offices as applicable. And this includes notification of conflicts that develop after award, but before the award closes out.
Can I jump in just for a second and say, like, it's not a huge deal unless it's a huge deal, right? So if you click the box, somebody's going to say, what do you think is a conflict of interest? And then you're going to tell them, well, my spouse is on this and blah, 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 right? And they'll say, well, are you a supervisor for your spouse? And you're going to say yes or no. And then they're going to say, well, if so, then this, and if not, then it's not a problem, right? And then it's done. But it's better to have that conversation before than after.
Right, and I think the big thing here is that conflicts happen all the time. It's not having a conflict of interest that's an issue. It's having a conflict without a management plan. So if you do have a conflict, all that will happen is that you'll go through the process of developing a plan for it.
Another common one is if you're submitting like an NIH SBIR, sometimes the PIs will own part of a company that is submitting to the SBIR. That's kind of a common conflict of interest, but again, it's not a big deal. All you have to do is complete the COI forms and present your management plan. So, and we have had plenty of awards come through that have been successful. So that's not an issue. It's just something that we have to go through. Why do I have to route my proposal? So the internal routing process alerts the appropriate people, including any co-PIs, department chairs, and college deans, that a proposal to be submitted requires their certification. And it also ensures that those listed on the proposal know that they are on the proposal. So that has actually happened where people aren't aware that they're on a proposal until they receive an email. And those who need to certify will be notified by email to go in and certify. And then once the internal signatures are secured, ORS or the PI has the authority to legally submit the proposal on behalf of the university. And it is a policy of ours to have the proposal routed completely before we do submit. Okay, so some other relevant information, the deadlines. Please check your guidelines to see if the proposal has a hard or soft deadline. If it has a hard deadline, what time is it due? Make sure it's Central Time, Eastern Time. We don't want to miss anything like that. Our office closes at 5, so anything past 5 must be arranged and approved by your PDS beforehand, since it is after hours. Now, we have made exceptions, but we do need to know ahead of time if you do need an exception. And it's important to note that hard deadline proposals cannot be submitted even 1 minute past the deadline. It's possible if we do submit 1 minute past that they could throw it out without even reviewing it. So it's something to keep in mind if you're pushing it to the last minute. And we try our best to accommodate everyone, but short-term turnaround or last-minute proposal submissions can definitely be a challenge, especially when we have heavy deadlines, such as OCAS proposals or those kind of big deadlines that come up.
So Bonnie, I was wondering if you were going to say it, but like when there's an OCAS deadline, how many proposals get submitted?
I think this year we did close to 20.
So 20 of these are going through in one day. So if you can imagine 20 people saying, Bonnie.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. This is definitely a very deadline driven job. So it becomes stressful. And we do ask, that our PIs give us a little leniency and try to submit a little earlier. So we ask that you try to target for a deadline date at least 2 days before the hard deadline to allow time to correct errors or discrepancies. But, if you can give us a little more than 2 days, we would definitely appreciate it. Subcontracts. So subcontracts to OU require official paperwork from the organization. We require them to provide a letter of intent signed by an authorized representative of their organization. We need the same documents from them as we use for our routing. So we need a statement of work, budget justification, and they all need to be specific to the subcontracts portion of the project. And we have to have that full subcontract package before we can route our proposal internally. And it is important to note that OUHSC is a completely separate entity from OU Norman. So any funds flowing between our organizations are normally set up as a subcontract. And the same is true if we are a sub-award. We need to provide required subcontract documents to the lead organization.
So Bonnie, can you talk quickly about how this affects timeline? Because OUHSC requires 2 weeks.
Yes, OUHSC, they have a policy in place that they need a week to route their proposals. So they are going to require subcontract documents from us probably 2 weeks before their proposal is due. And then when we ask for subcontract documents from them, it takes sometimes up to 3 weeks to get them. So if you're planning on having HSC as a subcontract on your proposal, you need to make sure that you have the co-PI or the PI there start with their, I think it's called Sooner Grants. They need to start the routing as soon as possible, because if they go into HSC 3 days before the proposal is due, there's no way that it will go through. Not a chance. So just keep that in mind, that you need minimum of 3 weeks if you have OUHSC as a subcontract.
We're using HSC as a example because we do subcontract with them, but this is true of any organization, right?
Yes.
They're going to need time to get their files together.
Yes, because every organization has their own policies. So cost share. And we're just going to touch briefly on this. You just need to check your guidelines to see if cost share is required. Most sponsors do not require cost share, but if they do, it will be clearly specified in the solicitation. And a training session is offered for those who may be submitting to sponsors who require cost share. Now, cost share is a whole different ballgame. So if you are going to submit to sponsors, I definitely recommend that you take the training session. You can reach out to a PDS, but it's best to take the training session first. So indirect costs or F&A. Indirect costs represent research support costs incurred by the university. IDC expenses include costs of labs and facilities usage, building maintenance, utilities, general grant administration and accounting, and other university services. So currently the negotiated rate for on-campus research is 55%. So if the rate is restricted and published in the solicitation, ORS will automatically honor that rate. But if you think that the work might be considered off campus or another sponsored activity, which is not necessarily regular research, talk to your PDS. There are certain steps that we can take to see if your proposal qualifies for the lower IDC rate.
I do like to underscore here, this is a federally negotiated rate. This is the expectation the federal government has for indirect costs, right? There are some programs that will say no. And so if it's directly written in the RFP that we do not pay indirect costs, because some of them will say that, especially from nonprofits, then what Bonnie is saying is that they will then not charge this on top of your budget. But
Right.
for like wet lab research, this is absolutely expected. Do not feel bad. And in fact, this is cheap.
Yes, like the big sponsors like NIH and NSF, they're fully expecting to pay the full 55%. But then there's like, for instance, fellowships, any type of foundations, they usually don't allow any IDC. So signature authority. For most sponsored project actions, such as agreements, signature authority must be authorized by the Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma. In some systems, they'll call this authorized official, official signature, signing official, administrative official. But the most important thing to take away is do not sign anything without proper authorization. If you get a contract in from a sponsor, do not sign it before turning it over to your SPC, because likely you do not have the authority to sign that contract. And we all want everyone to receive their fair share of the research credit that they've worked so hard for. And the only way that we can ensure this is by routing and submitting through ORS. So please don't bypass us. So obtaining sponsor accounts. There are many different proposal submission portals used by various agencies. Normally, proposals are submitted using OU's organizational registration. However, some sponsors require the PI to start the proposal in the submission system, such as like NSF, they'll require you to start the proposal, grant us access. We can go in and enter the budget, and then we end up submitting the proposal on behalf of the university. And you will find some account quick links on the ORS website to obtain required accounts for NSF, ERA Commons accounts, which are required to submit NIH proposals, or the OGX account, which is required to start a proposal in, like for the OCAS submissions. And for any other systems, we just recommend that you contact us to discuss whether ORS has an account or if the PI needs to create one in this, the solicitation, the sponsor system.
This is also something you do not want to do on the day of submission.
Yes, please don't. Please don't email us the day of the submission and say, I don't have an NSF account, or I don't have an ERA Commons account. Because sometimes it can take a couple days to get those set up. And if you have a question or concern, just contact us as soon as possible. Usually we can answer your question, and if not, we can definitely find the answer pretty quickly. And of course, the more time we have, the better, but we can usually accommodate everyone. Just reach out to us, let us know what your situation is. If it's something with a short turnaround, we'll see what we can do for you. I mean, sometimes things do come up quickly and it's not your fault, and we usually can accommodate it. We're pretty understanding. We can help out. OU receives many audits on sponsored projects, and if you're contacted about an audit, please reach out to ORS or reps for guidance. Don't contact me though, I don't have any idea what that means.
So just to be clear, audits are things that happen all the time and you may not know. And sometimes it gets to the point where they do actually want to know, like, where did you spend this money? You bought a computer 2 days before the grant ended. Was this for the grant? Right? Things like that. So, so most of it gets handled, especially if people in ORS know what's going on. They can just handle it without you even knowing. But sometimes you will get asked. But it's best that ORS knows what's happening so they can handle that for you.
That's just beyond my specialty, but I can find the answer. So below is just a list of helpful websites and contacts. And on the next page, this is a list of PDSs and SBCs. It's broken down by alphabet, and like some different departments is how we're assigned, has our contacts on there. This is also online. So if you ever have a question, who might be helping you, just feel free to email us or give us a call.
So to be clear, this is generally how it works, but sometimes if somebody is just swamped because there's a deadline where they have 20 proposals to submit, they'll assign you to somebody else, right? So they'll try to even the workload out. It's all determined, and you'll find out when you submit the info sheet. So somebody will come back to you and say, I'm your PDS for this.
We should reach out to you within 24 hours after we receive an information sheet. So if we don't, reach out to us. And this is our fancy new website. It has a lot of good information. At the bottom is a link to the website, and you'll also find the link to the information sheet. And I do encourage everyone to use it as a resource for all the information, basically that I've gone through. It should help you with that. It also has policies, guidance, some information that you need for compliance, rates for GRAs, tuition, things like that. And any questions?
Don't have any in the chat right now. Does anyone have